Hi, my name is Amy Summers and today I'll be looking at child anxiety, particularly a paper called Maternal Emotion Regulation During Child Distress, Child Anxiety Accommodation and Links Between Maternal and Child Anxiety. So firstly, a little bit of background on this issue. Well, I guess anxiety disorders are important to look at because they significantly impact the quality of life for, all individuals who have this. It's been found that between 8 and 15% of youth have anxiety disorders. So that's based on past research. It's also been found that anxiety disorders tend to cluster in families, and this is previous studies have found that this is because of biological factors, so things like genetics and having a predisposition to anxiety, as well as environmental factors, which might include parenting or other dynamics in a household. And while we do understand that there is a link between parenting and child anxiety, our actual information, our knowledge of this is quite limited. So we understand that there's a link, but we don't really know what that link is. Which is why this study was so important. So it's delving a bit deeper, I guess, into that link between the parents and a child anxiety. So what was hypothesized for this study was, first of all, that maternal anxiety and child anxiety will be associated with each other. It was also predicted that maternal anxiety and child anxiety will each be associated with maternal accommodation frequency. So this is how often a mother will get involved or have interactions with a child when they're in distress. And also the timing of these accommodations. So, how long they wait before they get involved, they accommodate the child. Finally, it was predicted that mothers of anxious children will report a greater increase in negative effect. So for this particular study to, I guess, investigate this link, 45 English-speaking mothers were recruited. So these were all mothers of children aged 3 to 8 years old. First of all, there were some baseline measures conducted, and this was via an online survey. So things like child anxiety were measured using Spence Children's Anxiety Scale for parents. Maternal anxiety was also measured using the anxiety scale of the Depression Anxiety Stress Scales, the 21-item measure there. And also maternal accommodation frequency. So how often the person was likely to, get up and accommodate their child when they're during distress. Then every participant was invited to a lab to complete a child distress task. So essentially what this looked like was an audio clip where they would listen to a child being put to bed, and then the child would scream out and get quite distressed, calling out for the parent. And so they were required to click the T button whenever they would get involved and accommodate the child. And finally, maternal effect was measured before and after the child distress task by using the positive and negative effects schedule. So the results of this study found a number of interesting things. First of all, there was no surprise. As previous research suggested, there was an increased mother anxiety did lead to increased child anxiety. There was a link there. Maternal anxiety also predicted greater maternal accommodation. So the more anxious the mother, the more likely they were to get involved and accommodate the child. Also found that there was a link between maternal anxiety and child anxiety and maternal accommodation frequency, so the amount of times that they accommodate the child. But there was no significant link found between the timing of these accommodations, so how quickly they were to respond to the child, and maternal anxiety and child anxiety. So it was all about the frequency with these results. Finally, it was found that mothers of anxious children typically had a greater increase in negative effect themselves. So I guess what these results indicate were that, first of all hypotheses were supported, with the exception that timing would have a link with maternal anxiety and child anxiety. So there was no significant results in terms of the timing of maternal accommodations in either of these. But overall, the results did support the existing research. So it really built on, I guess, a theoretical foundation. The results already exist there. We knew that there was a link between parental anxiety and child anxiety, and this sort of built gave us a bit further insights. It also provided, I guess, further detail into why this link exists. And that was really around because of the greater maternal accommodation in terms of frequency. Finally, it did identify a link between maternal emotion regulation difficulties and maternal accommodation. So what was found was that mothers who had trouble regulating their own emotions were more likely to go in and accommodate the child more often. And this also led to greater child anxiety. So definitely an interesting topic worthy of further research. I guess there was lots of helpful insights that can be applied to practical application, and that's why this is a valuable study. At the moment, there's lots of different treatments out there for anxiety and child anxiety more specifically, some involving parental involvement, some not, but the results of these, and their effectiveness is currently quite inconsistent. There's definitely mixed reviews out there around sort of what works and what doesn't. The results of this study obviously focused on the frequency of accommodation, and that was much more impactful than time of accommodation, which is really helpful learning. So if we are training parents and helping them get involved in the treatment of child anxiety, it would be more helpful to focus on the frequency of the accommodations as opposed to the timing, how quickly they get involved when their children are experiencing distress. The results also suggest that teaching parents how to regulate emotions would be extremely helpful in managing child anxiety. So I think there was the results clearly indicated that a parent's ability to manage their own emotions has an impact on how they manage a child during distress, and then obviously the child's level of anxiety in turn. So being able to have a treatment options where the parents are also learn to manage their behaviours as well would be really helpful, which I think poses a few interesting questions. So would we benefit from a more standardized approach to treating child anxiety? Obviously, this would need a little bit of further research to do this, but I think the more we sort of understand about it, it might be the case that we do have a more standardized approach that perhaps does include, individual treatment for the child, but also family treatment with the parents, and, how that sort of dynamic works there. I guess whether the identification of parental behaviours in itself would actually help to optimise the outcomes and improve, the levels of child anxiety. So I think that would be sort of, interesting next steps there. Just going back to the actual study, there was, obviously we'll take a look at strengths and limitations. So strengths, it was a really robust study design. It did use valid instruments to, assess each of the constructs. It was based on a really strong theoretical foundation. So it did sort of take that next step in the existing literature. And it focused on sequential method rather than just the link. So it was actually explaining why maternal anxiety impacts child anxiety rather than just, a link existing. In terms of limitations, a self-report scale was used for, the mother had to self-report for anxiety, which obviously can impact the results. It was a relatively small sample, so the study could benefit from a larger sample next time. And also only mothers were included. So as we discussed before, it would be beneficial to have other parental figures, particularly, males, to look at the difference there. The study was also quite one-dimensional. So in a realistic situation, there would be a lot of things at play if we're looking at child anxiety, and this study doesn't really look at other things like siblings or the dynamics in a household or other things happening. So implications for future research, I've already touched on a number of them, but an additional investigation into maternal anxiety and child anxiety using a broader sample. So perhaps a bigger sample, looking at general population norms and also norms for children already in mental health programs for anxiety. It would also be interesting to look at males and the difference between a male parent and a female parent, whether there is an impact there. Also looking at the parental emotional regulation. So I think this is a really interesting point and really important if we're looking at practical implications. So that's why, if we could learn a bit more about how a parent's ability to regulate their own emotion impacts their accommodation, which also impacts, the child anxiety. I think the more we know about that, the more we can optimise treatment plans. And also, rather than just the frequency of accommodations, perhaps the actual type of accommodation, so whether they're quite calm and soothing or whether they're sort of stern and impatient, the more we know about that can also help in sort of training the parents and helping them to manage their own behaviours. And then also looking at the effectiveness of different treatments to manage parental emotional regulation. So I think based on those results, that would be a great topic for future research. It's looking like there would be a practical treatment plan to have, individual treatment as well as family treatments as well to sort of manage that, the parent side as well. So looking at the different treatment plans that include them and actually what's most effective would be really helpful. And those are my references. Thank you very much.